Hello, I'm Chris Schnee, and I'm trying out a role-playing game today. This is the game Worlds Without Number, a fantasy game in the style called Old School Renaissance, or OSR. This is sort of an old school Dungeons & Dragons type of thing, but it's not their specific D&D brand, and it goes back to some of the roots of the hobby in terms of things like wilderness exploration and paying attention to reactions of characters. So I'm curious to see how it goes. I'm trying this out with a version of the solo gameplay rules, trying to make one character who is not completely squishy and able to go on a short adventure to try the system out. I have had this idea bouncing around in my head for a while now about an earth-shaping mage, somebody who can reshape stones to create walls and towers and towns and roads and things like that. It just seems like a cool concept that I might use in a story at some point. So I happen to have some art that I commissioned about a character like that, so I'm going to make a character based on that. I'm showing a character sheet here on 2 pages. That's the whole Worlds Without Number character sheet. Fairly simple. We have a character who has high intelligence and charisma, a little light on strength, and is going to be relying heavily on magic to survive, and on hirelings, which the charisma should help with as well. This character is an elementalist, which means having element-themed abilities, and I'm flavoring it to say this character focuses on earth as an element, and is going to go for all the rock-related spells when possible. At first level, that doesn't mean a whole lot, but it does mean things like being able to shape small masses of rock and fling a generic elemental blast around a couple of times per scene, and after using those powers, she's got to run away because there's not a whole lot else this character could do in combat. But that's okay, you don't need to have a combat-focused character all the time. My backstory for Shayl here is that she is a professional mason working in a city who happened to encounter a magic-using hermit and has agreed to learn magic in return for going on a little quest to explore some ruins and find an artifact belonging to the hermit, which is an excuse to go into the wilderness and explore a dangerous ruin, something that your mason would not normally want to do. So, I'm starting off with some basic rules. I am fudging it a little bit using the heroic rules, where basically damage is filtered through a certain simple table, so that heroes take less damage than they normally would and inflict more damage than they usually would. There's a little more detail to it, but we'll get into that. And I'm starting this character off with some artisan equipment and wilderness travel gear and some money, a fairly arbitrary amount. Starting off, Scene 1. Shayl has come back to the starting town where she works and is preparing for a dangerous trip. She buys some camping equipment and then wants to hire some people to come along on a wilderness trip. I've rolled an intelligence roll on the connect skill and get a result of 10, and that says, yeah, okay, that's a good roll. A typical difficulty would be 6 if it's very easy, 8 would be something that's actually challenging, so 10 would be a very good roll in general. So I'm saying, yeah, okay, Shayl hires a wilderness guide following the standard prices of 10 silver pieces per day, a porter for 5, and a veteran sellsword for 10 a day. 25 costs per day. I'm going to knock that down to 20 total because I rolled well. Okay, fine. So 20 silver pieces a day, I've got 80, that's going to be tough. I'm thinking this ruin is around 3 days of travel away, so that's going to be difficult financially. How am I going to handle that? Let's say that Shayl has promised them fun and adventure, and also being paid back out of regular wages, and anything that they find in the ruins that will contribute to the price. So they're speculative here, and only really Shayl's charm has convinced them to come along on this without fully paying them up front. I was thinking that the general terrain of this area is mountainous and warm, so we've got some rocky terrain, maybe some forest and jungle, savanna, that kind of thing. So, they set off from town. There are 4 of them. Shayl the mage, the sellsword, who is going to be the main guard, a porter carrying a lot of food and water and other miscellaneous supplies, and finally a wilderness guide who hopefully knows how to get around. Rules say there's supposed to be 1 encounter check per day of travel and once per night of camping outdoors. So, we're going through ordinary wilderness. I'm rolling a D8 for the first day of travel. A 1. Okay, so we have an encounter the very first day. I roll the encounters on a D20 table, and I'm using a sample table here for wilderness events. I get a 1 again. A horse or pack animal goes lame. We don't actually have pack animals for this, I think. We just have a human porter. So he goes lame. He is wandering around and he trips and hurts his ankle. I'm thinking about how to react to this. We're not super heavily laden here, but we do need the wilderness equipment, the food and water and the tents and everything. I'm thinking the Wilderness Guide has some general idea about how to deal with these wilderness injuries, even though he's not really a trained medic. And he's able to split the guy's leg up and give him a few hours rest when they were hopefully going to rest anyway, and get him hobbling along, but he really can't carry very much anymore. We're going to probably send that guy back. So carrying giant piles of treasure is not really an option here, but he's able to get home reasonably safely, and we'll try to send him a gift basket or something when we get back. Moving on, I'm rolling for an encounter that first night. A 2. We're actually safe this time. And I'm wondering at this point about the wilderness encounter table, because the part about making rolls for this kind of thing suggests that it's not always bad. It can just be an obnoxious nobleman kicking people off the road or something, versus this table that seems to be pretty much all terrible events, almost entirely. I think what I'm going to do is give myself, say, a 25% chance, roll low, of any of these events turning out to be something that's not on that D20 table, just to see what happens. So, second day of travel, encounter roll of 3, we're fine. That evening, a roll of 8, we're fine. Day 3, 5, fine. And night, 7, we're also fine. So, successful arrival, except for the poor porter. The mountains stretch up ahead, and the Wilderness Guide is surprised because there has indeed been an earthquake that has shattered a large chunk of the cliffs here, and it has exposed a passage of some kind leading into a ruin, just as foretold. So what kind of ruin is this anyway? I'm picturing it as an exposed stone entrance in a mountain that's been exposed by falling rocks and has a lot of debris around it. I'm rolling on a Types of Ruin site table here, where the basic type says a military site, and a second d6 tells me more specifically it's a half-subterranean entrenchment. I see that actually should have been a d12, not a d6, but I'll roll with it. Rolling a d8 and d12 to see what kind of entrances we get here. In the first room, 1 and 12, which means one entrance to the northwest. I'm going to pretend I'm coming at this from the south here, and really there ought to be more than one room, so entering from the south, leaving to the northwest. And what does this first room look like? It's a simple tool called Dungeon Scroll for drawing a map here. So I've got a basic setup here showing an entrance from the south and a passage roughly to the northwest. I'm rolling for what kind of room is ahead. 8 and 5. And I get Religious Room, storage for religious equipage. That's interesting. This is supposed to be sort of a military fortification. Okay, and what kind of stuff is here? Is there actual religious equipment of some kind? I roll a 3 and a 2 for contents here, which says a creature, but also some kind of treasure. At this point, it's Shayl wandering into here, poking her nose in with the sellsword nearby, and the ranger looking in curiously. The ranger hasn't been paid to go into this actual dangerous area, so he doesn't want to go any farther, but he's got a bow ready as he peeks in here out of curiosity, and he might be able to help out if we get attacked by something. It looks like something dangerous is here, but what? The book's advice here is to think of something that would logically be there, and consider that when looking at random generation tables, and also to not go too hard on yourself if you're actually doing something for a novice adventurer. It should fit into the logic of the world, so you're not necessarily going to encounter level-appropriate creatures in all places. The example that the book gives is if you've established some place as the lair of a Devil King, then there probably ought to be a Devil King there, and it shouldn't be easy just because you're level 1 when you get there. Also, it's likely that this place has just been opened up by the earthquake, so it's not just obscure. There hasn't been time for much stuff to get in here. It's either something that was already sealed in here, or maybe it's a wild animal that got in. I'm going to look at the table for Ancient Sorcerer King Ruin and roll a d12 and see what we get here. A 10, which says Outsider Prisoners Gone Native here. Okay, thinking about that, that would mean there's some kind of creature that has been trapped here for a long time, I think, and it's a strange, otherworldly kind of creature. Something that survived without having a clear supply of food and water, so supernatural and dangerous. I'm going to use the stats for a small, vicious predator, like a wolf or a congressman or something. I'm going to allow for a toss-up in initiative, and first the monster gets a 6, and my party gets a 1. Okay, so this monster gets the jump on us. Logically, the swordsman is in front, so he's going to get attacked. Attack roll of 11. That does actually not beat this guy's AC, which is 13, which, by the way, is consistent with him wearing a leather jacket and carrying a small shield. Pretty reasonable. Now, normally, a monster like that would be able to do shock damage, meaning that it can do damage to someone in melee even if it technically misses on its roll. However, the part of the benefit of having a shield in this game is that you can ignore certain instances of shock damage. So in this case, the monster leaps out and it hits this guy's shield, he bats it aside and takes a swing. A nat 20. Nice. Unfortunately, there's no automatic critical hit system in this game, I think. I'm going to assume this guy is wielding a mace for d6 damage, and he gets a 2. Not great. This monster is listed as having 1 hit die. That's a little confusing because it's assumed that they have about d8 hit points per hit die. So figure that as a 4, half of that, and he just did 2 damage. I think the ranger hangs back, considering that he doesn't want to shoot into melee like that. That gives Shayl an opening to try to attack with magic. Although, to my surprise, page 43 of the rulebook actually says outright, no, there is no penalty for shooting into melee because hopefully your party is smart enough to not get in the way, and it would not be much fun if you constantly had the melee people imposing a penalty on the range people. Okay then. Ranger opens up with an attack, rolls a 10 to hit, and this guy is basically a non-combatant, so he's not going to have even a +4 to hit. The arrow goes wide. He's more used to hunting wild game. I was about to have Shayl attack, but it occurs to me I'm missing the morale roll that I ought to be doing here. This monster has just been beaten half to death by 1 blow. It has a listed morale of 7. I'm going to bump that to 8 due to its unnatural nature. So I roll 2d6, and I get a 1 plus 3 for total. So this is an unnatural creature enough that it's not phased even by taking severe damage, but it could have happened. So it's now Shayl's attack. Shayl is being treated as a heroic PC, so she works a little bit differently. During my attack, I can roll a fray die, which is sort of a miscellaneous blast or attack of some kind. Because Shayl is a mage, this is only a wimpy d4, however it can hit even a powerful foe, which doesn't really matter in this case, but I roll a 2 on the die. So there is a damage filter here for heroic characters. That means 1 point of damage inflicted, and because this is a heroic character doing the damage, that's not 1 point of damage, that's 1 hit die of damage inflicted, which is very powerful compared to most ordinary people's attacks. So without even getting into Shayl's real normal PC attacks, that fray die alone is enough to finish this creature off. So while the swordsman is fending this thing off, bashing it with a shield, knocking it around with his mace, and the arrow goes flying and misses, Shayl casts a quick spell to fling magically conjured gravel, and slam this creature so hard that it's finished off. It crashes to the ground, and the dungeon is silent again. Until the ranger says, okay, I'm out of here, you're not paying me for this part, I'm going to wait outside while you have fun. The good news is there's also some kind of treasure in here. And rolling on a table about locations, it's tucked into secret furniture space. Shayl and the swordsman search this area, and they find, besides this strange creature's body, they find a place where there are some religious relics left over from this attempted storage in the past. And any inspiration about the type of treasure it might be, other than religious. Another table gives me spices of rare worth. So this is like incense that's been found lying around here in a sealed container. Interesting. So we're back to room exploration. I see a roll of 4 and 7 on my dice, which means 2 exits ahead. The direction said south, which doesn't make sense in this context, so I'm rolling again and getting 2 copies of north. So I'm drawing a fork in the path. Shayl and the swordsman look along them. And what are they doing for light exactly? I'm assuming that Shayl lights a torch and has it in one hand. So torch in one hand, staff in the other. Here I'm going to break out some cards from a set called the Game Master's Apprentice that have some interesting phrases and sensory prompts and icons to suggest things. So I'm going to draw 1 for the left and 1 for the right side. On the left, I get some prompts suggesting a sword and armor, but also a filthy smell. On the right side, there's a sense of something savory that also makes Shayl sneeze, and something disguised, possibly a thing to stash that's valuable. Not quite sure what. given the pleasant smell and the recent incense, Shayl is going to say maybe there's more valuable stuff like that over in the right-hand passage, and it's going to go that way first. I roll. 2 exits total. 1 the way I came, 1 to the east. And it shows up as an empty room with treasure in it. Actual room, which is a library or archive. Okay, putting together what we know, this is kind of a religious fortification, and it had incense already. There was a smell that was vaguely pleasant, but also sneeze-inducing. And this is some kind of archive. I'm thinking there are interesting books in here, or other documents that are kind of odd-smelling and moldering a bit, but maybe valuable. Another D20 roll suggests that it's made of an unearthly material. Not sure I'm going to go with that, but I'll keep that in mind as a possible thing. It's some kind of book. I'm going to worry about the exact nature of this thing a little later. Shayl is looking for a particular magic stone, so I'm kind of looking for a room that gives me an excuse to say that the treasure is a mystic stone of some kind. Off to the east. 3 exits. West, southeast, and east. West is the way we came. This shows up as an artist's workroom. And again, it shows up as empty, but with treasure in it. What kind of treasure? I don't know. Let's roll for location. 11, which is a slid behind a tapestry or painting. So some kind of artwork in here and something hidden behind it while they're rummaging. And I draw a random card that says smuggled goods, such as illegal magic, dangerous drugs, or active soul stones. How to interpret that here? There's a picture of a crumbled tower, an icon suggesting a sword, shield, and a target. By the way, whatever that art thing was, is it at all valuable? I'm treating this as unlikely odds with Game Master's Apprentice and drawing a card that says, no, it's not particularly valuable. What about the hidden thing, though? The fact that it was hidden behind something suggests that it's fairly valuable. I haven't got a good idea here, short of invoking a magic item that's probably overpowered for the situation. I'm just going to say there's a cache of money here that was probably somebody's ill-gotten gains for something. So, money. The swordsman begins to look pleased. Since it looks like he's actually going to get paid, I'm just hoping he remains honest. He points out that Shayl hasn't been very detailed about exactly where this stone, or whatever it is she's looking for, is supposed to be found, or where her mentor lost the thing, if indeed he ever had it. And Shayl really doesn't know. So, kind of shrugging, she points at the door to the east and says, let's break that down. Why are there doors? I just felt like drawing them rather than having everything be open. Is a door something that the swordsman can reasonably break down? I'm implying good odds to that. And actually, no, I draw a no on the card. Okay, so for the moment, they're going to try the southern door. Can they open that one easily? Good odds? Yes. Okay, so they break that one down, or force it open. And this one shows up as kitchen or dining hall containing a creature, and 3 total exits that are north, northwest, and east. I'm going to combine the first 2. Here is another creature encounter. I'm thinking these might be wild creatures that got into a food supply in a kitchen when this place was opened up by the recent earthquake. So I'm drawing a card with a random odds chance of high, and saying, yes, indeed, they are wild creatures rather than another of those supernatural things. Okay, wild creatures, scavengers of some sort. I'm going to use a reaction roll to get some idea of how hostile these things are. That's a roll of 1 and 4, total of 5, which makes them unusually unfriendly or hostile. So we didn't just stumble across a deer that's gotten in here, it's something fairly aggressive. So this is like a wild, hungry dog or wolf or something that we've encountered. I'm going to give it an instinct check to see some idea of what it's doing. I get a roll for it attacks the last creature to have fought it. I'm interpreting that as, yes, it does try to charge an attack. So, angry, scared wolf, something like that. The swordsman is going to try to back off and slam the door on this thing, which raises the question, by the way, of how did it get in here if the door was closed. I'm having him roll a speed-based check, call it a exert dexterity thing, give him like a +1 to it. He rolls a 9. Yeah, I'll give it to him. He slams the door in this creature's face. It smacks its nose into the door and whines, falling back on the other side with a thump. Okay, so that's 1 dead end for the moment, although they can probably open the door and attack this thing later. They shrug, and Shayl and the swordsman decide to back off and try the left-hand path for the moment. Over there, I had determined that it smelled, but had some sense of weapons and armor possibly being there. I've just now rolled for A meager room of a minor servant. This could be like barracks for soldiers who lived here, maybe. 3 exits total, said to be east and west. The other one would have to be south. Actually, I'm going to put this off to the west a bit. Roll that it contains a distractor, which is something unusual and not necessarily relevant, although it could be. A half-completed work done by inhabitants. Okay, putting together what I've got here, I'm thinking they were in the middle of sharpening weapons or armor or something like that. Since it's not listed as treasure, it's probably not very valuable, but there might be something worthwhile here, like scrap metal, something like that. I'm going to shrug, and based on an icon here and other stuff I've drawn or looked at and rolled so far, there's a helmet in fairly good condition that might be worth something, and miscellaneous bits of arms and armor that might be recovered for bits of scrap metal or slight value if the fighter feels like taking them back. To the south, we get a one-entrance room, so a dead end. Dead end is listed as having a secret or unobtrusive entrance with ornate but harmless doors. So this was another way into the facility. Ornate doors don't really make any sense in this context. I'm going to roll something a little bit different and get a 9 for shrines or hedge ritual remains of inhabitants. Okay, so this was like a more religious part of the facility, so they had little warrior shrines in here. And it's also a secret passage out. To the north, I actually kind of had to fudge the rules here, something about access to the north and northwest, and I combined them, and I ruled that it was a residential area with guest rooms or something, so I'm saying this is like an officer's quarters, and it contains an enigma. Temporal distortions, or visions of other times. After all, this is a strange magical thing, so I'm going to give this a slight chance, low probability that this is related to the stone that she's looking for. Bad odds, yes. Okay, actually, so this is closely related somehow. I've drawn 3 more cards from my Game Master's Apprentice set, and I'm trying to interpret what these various words and symbols might mean here. I get some disturbing stuff about death or change, and heart suggests a personal relationship, such as being directly connected to the guru or hermit that Shayl knows. And somebody came through here blasting people with elemental power and laughed at them, leaving behind this mystic stone in the officer's quarters. So there was a fight here with some powerful elemental person, possibly the hermit himself. I think the vision is unclear enough that Shayl isn't sure if it's the same person or some rival. But in any case, something happened such that the stone was left here. Maybe the elementalist got too overconfident and was defeated here. In any case, there's an artifact lying around here. Looks like this stone that Shayl's been looking for. A roll on a jewelry table suggests it is some sort of bracer, armlet, anklet, something like that. I'll say it is a bracelet set with a shimmering stone. The swordsman understandably asks, what is that? What's so special about it? He doesn't seem to have caught the same vision that Shayl had, and is wondering why Shayl is so upset and confused about what she saw. She tells him honestly that she's not sure what's so important about this, but it does seem to be what she was sent here to get. She takes it and puts it away before the swordsman can get any ideas about taking it. I'm not really sure what enchantment this thing has on it, really, but it was clearly important. So, Shayl turns to the swordsman and says, well, do you want to investigate the rest of the space while we're here? There might be more valuables. And he says, yeah, sure, we'll look around. So they go back to that dining hall entrance, open the door, and prepare to blast that thing. I think they probably get the jump on it. Do they? Good odds, and surprisingly I roll a no on that. So this creature was pretty much by the door, and it heard them coming, and it leaps out at them. It goes first. 15 to hit, and I'm treating it as another small vicious predator rather than moving up to the stats for a tiger or something. Gonna give it d4 damage. A 1 point of damage. Lucky that time. The swordsman is focused on defense with a shield. Shield's not messing around here. Starting off with the fray die of d4. That's an automatic hit for 1 point of damage. And now, Shayl actually does something more useful, calling on the elemental blast power. That requires an actual attack roll. It gives me a 19 to hit, and 2 points of damage given the heroic rules. That's 3 points of damage inflicted this round on this creature. It's badly hurt. Does it reconsider its life choices? We're giving it a morale roll of 5, 6, 11. I've said this thing is a natural animal, so it doesn't have complete robotic, insane motivations to attack to the death. This thing backs off and huddles in the back corner of the room, licking its wounds, trying to avoid everyone. That leaves some space free for Shayl and the swordsman to come in. They're eyeing this thing warily and ready to blast it if it makes another move. The swordsman will basically hold his action and prepare to attack this thing if it comes in, so he'll kind of automatically win initiative if it tries to fight again, but it's probably just going to hang back and hope they go away. That leaves him free to explore the room. By the way, that elemental blast ability involved committing effort. Basically, Shayl can do that 3 times per scene before running dry. That's not really a problem here, and in this case it doesn't yet conflict with Shayl's other abilities, so you can think of it as just a 3 times per scene ability for now. And that's separate from the Fray die, which happens every round, is considered free. I get a religious storage room, but this thing is right off of a kitchen or dining hall. I'm thinking it's more of just a culinary storage room in this case. I get more exits. I'm kind of consolidating these to also try to wrap up the dungeon. I roll a hazard with a collapsing floor. Okay, so there is a room off of the dining hall that is meant to contain storage for the kitchen, but the floor has collapsed and rotted away under it. That's just there's some kind of basement area beneath it, where a lot of supplies have fallen. Tempting to go down there. And here, Shayl gets an idea and begins to earn her salary. She has a spell called Elemental Favor. That allows an elemental mage to pick a 10-foot volume of an element and just say, hey, reshape yourself into whatever shape I say. That includes things like taking a 10-foot volume of stone and reshaping it into a crude staircase. So now there are stairs going down to this lower floor. That works separately from Shayl's Elemental Blast thing. That's an actual spell, and right now Shayl can only cast 1 spell per day. Yep, 1 spell. That's why the Elementalists also care so much about the effort system, since that is something more versatile and usable more times per day. Spells are more of the heavy hitter things that change the environment. So Shayl walks down the new stone staircase and finds a room that shows up as a processing center for a raw good of some kind. I'm not sure how to interpret this, but it's connected to the supplies for the kitchen or dining hall. I'm thinking this was some place from which materials were brought into the facility, and the exits, I'm saying there's going to be one going off into the mountains, deeper into the direction that is on the other side of the mountains. So this might be the entrance to a cave system of some kind. I'm fudging the direction of that, and even the number of exits somewhat, to say that that's the direction that it goes. It's kind of the end of this dungeon. So Shayl peeks around down there and has no real interest in exploring the caves any further. The swordsman also isn't very interested in going that way right now. But hey, it could be a way into the other lands beyond the mountains. So Shayl considers this a victory, and is going to head back to town from here. It's going to be 3 days' journey back from there, back to town. The two of them meet up with the ranger, who's been fooling around trying to hunt. Let's see if he's had any success. I'll give him a half-day hunting roll. A +1 to his roll. Difficulty 9, call it. No, he rolls a 5, call it a 6 total. He's not able to find very much. He's just sort of amusing himself wandering around in this area looking for game or anything else interesting. They talk over the idea of trying to force their way past that broken door in the northeast, but decide, nah, it's just not worth risking their lives for right now. They've come away with some good stuff. What exactly? They have the Stone of Wandering, the quest item that Shayl was looking for, set in a bracelet. None of them really know what it's for, so nobody's too greedy about it. They have a container of incense. They have a decently preserved helmet, and miscellaneous bits of poor quality weaponry and armor. A valuable-looking unearthly book made of some odd material. I think Shayl was not able to open it or even to tell what the title was, but it's sealed with a lock or something, and she'll want to take it back to her master to learn more about what it is. And there's a sack of ill-gotten coins that was hidden behind a painting or something. How many coins exactly? I have a hard time getting the scale of how much stuff is worth in this game offhand, but let's treat this as a minor ruin, and I roll a 2 on that scale. Based on a chart they have, that would suggest 1d6 times 500 silver pieces in total. I roll a 4 on that, so it's like 2,000 silver pieces in total. It's recommended that about half of the value of a site's treasure should probably be in 1 or 2 large caches, and we'll say this is one of them. call it 1,000 silver pieces worth of stuff. Some of that might actually be gold, and it is antique coins that might be an interesting design. So this kind of creates a problem among potentially greedy hirelings. We have the sellsword and the archer looking at a sack of something like 1,000 coins and some other miscellaneous loot, and although Shayl is a powerful mage, even at level 1, they're a little bit tempted to maybe gang up on her. So we should have rolls some kind to see how they react to this loot. She's offering to pay them generously, maybe double what they're owed, but let's get some idea of a reaction roll. Shayl will roll the talk skill, which she doesn't have, so it'll be treated as -1, but she has a +1 to charisma, so a total of 6, which is a respectable roll that would pass an easy difficulty check. I'm going to give her a bonus by the fact that she's offered to be pretty generous about the paying them, say, double what they're owed, and they can keep the bits of weaponry and armor and the helmet. What she wants are the bracer, the mysterious book, and the container of incense. They'd rather have the coins anyway than mysterious items that they don't really know how to sell or even identify in the magic items cases. So they talk her up to paying triple what she would normally owe them, plus a full 6 days' pay for the poor porter when they get back. That's a total of 360 silver for the ranger and the fighter, plus another 30 for the porter, total of 390 paid out. Not bad, but we're assuming they're going to get back in 3 days as planned, so let's try that now. First day of travel back. No trouble. That night, they're fine. Second day. Oh, something happens on the second day. I'm going to give myself, again, a 25% chance of not rolling on that mostly bout counter table. And I roll a 3. Nope, I'm going to go for the probably bad roll of 19, which says maddening insects, can't sleep well. So all the way back, they're tormented by horrible insects on the second day. And that night, nope, nothing terrible happens that night beyond that. Between using the elemental favor spell to manipulate stone and improve their shelter a little bit that night, and actually flinging a couple of elemental blasts around out of sheer annoyance, Shayl manages to kill some of the insects and give them a less miserable night. I'm imposing a penalty called System Strain on them. This is something that limits healing, which isn't directly harmful, but being under privation like this from the terrible insects also means they can't recover effort for things like Shayl's abilities, spells, and the elemental arts. So by flailing around that night trying to kill bugs and create some kind of stone shelter and generally looking foolish and overreacting, Shayl was not fully prepared for what might happen the next day. The third day of travel? Very lucky, nothing actually happens that day, or that night. So there was some paranoia about not being fully prepared to cast spells, and possibly even being betrayed by her own hirelings. But they apparently got back to town in pretty good shape, worn out and running out of supplies, but happy because they had come back with enough loot to weigh them down. And so that's the end of Shayl's first adventure. She went on a quest to find this mystic stone on behalf of the hermit who trained her in magic, and successfully came back alive after some minor fighting and found this thing and some other loot besides. So what do I make of this adventure overall? I was trying to apply some of the rules of Worlds Without Number, including things like reaction rolls and morale rolls, and overland travel. I didn't really do anything with lighting, other than just acknowledging that Shayl has a torch. This game doesn't really have an easy access to a trivial light spell, or everybody having dark vision the way you would typically see in certain other games. If you really want to get into the dungeon crawl stuff in more detail in Worlds Without Number, you can do this system that keeps track of the timing of torches and things like that, and how long it takes to explore a room or have a fight. So I could have gone into a little more detail, and I could have also done more with the encumbrance system to track exactly who was carrying what and how much. It might be fun to try that at some point, but didn't bother doing it in this adventure here. Another thing I could have done would be to whip out Ironsworn, a system that has a add-on called Delve for talking about the exact contents of various rooms in a thematic dungeon. My mage character was using her spells to a limited extent for combat and for overcoming one exploration-based challenge, namely the staircase bit. I had to fudge the exact design of the levels, rooms, and exits to some extent several times, because I was just rolling so many exits that I would never have gotten to the end, and I really had to make a judgment call about when to have this magic item show up. And I don't really have a strong story in mind at this point. I think there is this area beyond the mountains which people will want to explore and which has been inaccessible for a long time until the earthquake. I just went on a trip to Yellowstone, so I think that's going to be inspiring the terrain that would be over there. And I've introduced a plot twist here by having this strange vision of another time where either the guru mentor or somebody else killed a bunch of people with elemental magic, and that has something to do with why this place is abandoned and how there was an officer who had come by this stone or was lost there. I'm not sure exactly what happened or even what the thing does, let alone what that book does. So I've introduced a possible plot thread there. After a single adventure, Shayl advances to level 2. Level advancement normally gets slower as you go on, but using the default progression, you get to level 2 after a single adventure, and you start to unlock more abilities, so that would be fun to explore later. So this was a randomly generated adventure, and I didn't really know what to expect. I tweaked it to make it reasonably easy. I had some combat, some exploration stuff. I relied on the hirelings to help survive, and that makes sense within the universe, although they don't use heroic rules even if you do. So maybe I made it a little too easy? I'm not sure. If I go on with this, I will probably try to have Shayl do something solo next, unless it's another expedition into the wilderness, and it would logically have something to do with this hermit and finding out more about what's going on. It doesn't have to be a dungeon crawl next time. It could be more of a research and social challenge. So I have a couple of ideas I can build on from here. About the Worlds Without Number system, it seemed to work pretty well. It was reasonably simple. I had to pull out this other deck of cards for some ideas because the terrain and dungeon generation systems were a little sparse despite all these tables. I'm using my own custom setting for this, which is a not really defined setting yet. But overall it worked pretty well. I got an adventure out of it and have some idea for what I would do next. So this was fun and reasonably easy. I hope my little narration was fun and give you some idea of what the system is like. If you're interested in the system itself, you can get the main book of it for free. It contains most of the content, and it also has a couple of other sister games that you can check out as well, using the same basic rule system. That's it for now. I'm going to take a break here. Thanks for listening.